Democracy. You hear this word all the time. We all think we know what it means, right? But what if I told you it's way more complicated than you think? That's what we're going to dig into today. Let's get right to it.
Okay, so let's kick things off with a quote that's going to make you lean in a little closer. Wow. Right off the bat, you can tell this isn't going to be a simple textbook definition. This really sets the stage, doesn't it? It kind of tells us there's way more to this whole rule by the people thing.
So, before we even try to nail down what democracy is, we've got to ask a more basic question. Why does it even matter? Why we need a strict definition anyway? The source material actually gives us a great way to think about this through a little classroom chat. So let's follow that thread.
And it starts with this question from a student named Mary, and honestly, it's the most logical question you could ask. Shouldn't the meaning have come first? I mean, of course, right? You define the word, then you find examples. That's how we're taught to do things. It just makes sense.
But then her teacher comes in with this amazing response. Think about it. We don't sit down with the dictionary to understand the word love, do we? No. We use it, we feel it, we see it, and that's how we figure out what it means. And the teacher's point is, well, maybe giant ideas like democracy work the same way.
And this is where it gets really important. The big reason we need a clear definition is because tons of different governments out there call themselves democracies. So how do you tell the real ones from the fakes? You need some kind of a measuring stick, right? A checklist to see if they actually walk the walk.
Okay, so let's do it. Let's start building our definition. We're going to start with a really simple, basic foundation. Think of it as our base camp before we start climbing the mountain.
Here it is, a form of government in which the rulers are elected by the people. Simple enough. And you know, it's actually pretty useful right away. It helps us immediately rule out things that are obviously not democracies, like, say, a monarchy where you inherit the throne, or a military dictatorship. Easy.
But hang on, is that really all there is to it? Is it good enough? I mean, if a country holds an election, any election, does that automatically make it a democracy? I'm not so sure. We really need to put this simple idea to the test.
So, let's take our simple definition out for a spin in the real world. Let's look at a test case and see if rulers are elected by the people really holds up under pressure.
And right away, we hit our first big question. The definition talks about rulers, but who are the actual rulers? What if the folks who win the election aren't the ones truly calling the shots?
Let's look at Pakistan under General Musharraf. See, they had elections. People voted for their representatives. But here's the catch. The real power, the final say, wasn't with those elected officials. It was with military officers and the general himself. And nobody elected them.
This cartoon just nails it, doesn't it? You've got the ballot box, the symbol of democracy, right out in the open. But behind the curtain, it's the military holding all the cards. So does that count as a democracy? No way.
So this case forces us to add our very first rule, our first key feature. It's not enough to just elect people. The people we elect have to be the ones with the final decision-making power. If they don't have that, then the election is basically meaningless.
Okay, on to test number 2. The definition says rulers are elected. But what does elected even mean? Is any old election good enough? What if you go to vote and there's no real choice on the ballot?
Let's look at China. Sure, they have elections, but you can only vote for candidates that the Communist Party approves. That's not much of a choice, is it? Or think about Mexico. For a long time, one party, the PRI, always won, sometimes using some, let's call them dirty tricks. You could vote, but you already knew who was going to win.
And this really highlights the difference between a real election and what you could call a pretend one. A real election has to have competition. It has to have a real choice. And, this is the big one, the people in power have to have a fair chance of losing. If they can't lose, it's not an election. It's just a show.
So, boom, there's our second key feature. A democracy has to be built on free and fair elections. And fair means the people in charge could actually get kicked out. If they can't lose, then there's no accountability to the voters. It's as simple as that.
Okay, let's look at the last piece of that simple definition. By the people. Sounds simple, but who are the people? Does it mean every single person? And does my vote count the same as your vote?
Because when you look around, you see that's often not the case. For a long time in Saudi Arabia, women couldn't vote at all. In Estonia, it's tough for the Russian minority to get the right to vote. And get this, in Fiji, the system is set up so that the vote of an indigenous Fijian is literally worth more than the vote of an Indian Fijian. That's not equal.
And that brings us to our third non-negotiable feature, and it's all about political equality. It's the whole one person, one vote, one value idea. Every adult citizen gets a vote, and every vote has to have the exact same weight. If you don't have that, you don't have a democracy.
All right, last test. Let's imagine a government checks all our boxes so far. The right people have power, the elections are fair, everyone's vote is equal. So, once they're in power, can they do whatever they want? Are there any limits at all?
Let's look at Zimbabwe. The ruling party was popular, no doubt, and it kept winning elections. But what did it do with that power? It changed the rules to give the president more power. It harassed anyone who disagreed with them, it controlled what the news could say, it even ignored rulings from its own courts. And that's a huge lesson. Just because you win an election doesn't mean you get to tear up the rulebook.
So that gives us our fourth and final feature for our definition. A democratic government has to play by the rules. It has to respect the Constitution, and it has to protect the basic rights of its citizens. Yeah, even the citizens who voted against them. This is what stops a democracy from becoming what's called a tyranny of the majority. Okay, so we started with a super simple idea. We ran it through the ringer with some real-world examples, and now we've built a much, much better definition. So let's lay it all out.
So here it is, the 4 key features of democracy. 1. The people elected by the public are the ones who make the big decisions. 2. The elections have to be a real choice, a fair fight where the people in power can actually lose. 3. Everybody gets an equal say, one person, one vote, one value. And 4. The government itself has limits. It has to follow the Constitution and protect citizens' rights. You need all 4 of these for it to be the real deal.
And that leaves us with this final thought to chew on. Democracies aren't perfect. We all know that. They have problems. But when we see those problems, what's the solution? Is it to give up on the idea? Or is the cure for the problems of democracy simply more democracy? A little something to think about. Thanks for joining me.